Okay, so where we left off earlier, right? I am able to navigate to users/new and sign up for a new account. Somebody shout out a username. Jimmy. Password will be Eat World. Is it Eats World?
Yeah.
Eats World, whatever. Yeah. I hit enter and it redirects me to profile page for Jimmy. Right. So we're at a point now where we are able to sign up for a new account. However, what I would like to be able to do is once I've already created an account, I want to be able to log in and kind of like see some information, right? Furthermore, we have a bit of a problem with our application. Users/new. Let's just make a new user. This will be Guy Fieri. Flavor Town, right? If I were to go into my show page for, where is it? Views, users, show.erb. What would stop me from doing something like this? Like button 2, right? Does anybody know the syntax for button 2? Okay, walk me through it.
Are you going to the user?
The thing that I would like to, I want this to delete the account.
Then alt delete.
Delete this profile, okay?
Comma and then the path.
Okay. What's the helper that I want to use?
User path and then the parameter is this specific user.
User path at user, okay. Anything else?
Delete is also that's already defaulted.
Right, because what HTTP verb corresponds with deleting somebody's account? A delete request, right? What are the HTTP verbs, right? HTTP verbs. HTTP request methods, right? Get, post, put, patch, and delete. The method on our controller is called destroy, right? So if I go to, right? If I navigate to localhost 3000 / Rails info routes, right? I can see a delete request to users/ID will hit the user's controller destroy method. So it's an HTTP verb of delete. So I'm saying here, send a delete method, right? And then our user's controller, right? We can just make a delete method or destroy, def destroy. And we can just say at user.destroy. And maybe we can redirect to new user path, right? Does anybody see, have we all seen this before? This find user, right? Because how many times am I going to have to run this code? User.find params ID.
At least 3 times.
Yeah. So why don't I just say, hey, you know what? Call this method on show and also destroy. So I don't have to type that a bunch of different times, right? If we refresh, there's a button that says delete this profile. RIP. What would stop me from just going through this application and deleting everybody else's account? Nothing, as it is. We need to fix this. Before we need to fix this, right, we need to finish setting up our login. But that's kind of where we're going with this. So what I want to be able to do, here's the functionality that I want. I want to be able to navigate to /login. Before we even get there, what controller do you think should own the responsibility of logging a user in? Well, let's think about this for a second, right? What is the act of creating a new user correspond with? We're going there somewhere, right? Like the point that I want to make here, right, is that like signing up and logging in are very different actions. Do you have a thought?
I was going to say welcome.
Or the point is it should be some other controller, right? Creating a new account means creating a new record in our database for a user. Logging in is just creating a new session for an existing user. It does not actually write anything to our database. So it should be a new controller. Since I'm not actually storing anything about the currently logged in user in my database, do I need a model for this? No. So I'm just going to say Rails G controller sessions, right? This is an existing user that's creating a new session in our application. All right. I meant to do, let me do this again with no test framework. Everybody know, by the way, you can undo a generator with Rails D for delete. Do you not know about that? Oh, it's like the command Z of generators.
Just undoing
Where do people hide these things from?
You just Google it. Hey, here's what I would do. How to undo Rails generate. And like the first thing that comes up is, great, Rails destroy controller la la la, Rails D, right? It's literally the first thing on Stack Overflow. If your question is, can I do this thing? Google it, find out. Okay, so this created a controller called sessions controller, made a view, and it actually didn't touch our routes. So, great. So if I refresh the page, will this still throw an error? Oh, well, it'll throw a different error. The error is that my server's not running. Right? What is this telling me? How do I fix this? Create a route. Routes.rb. Now, here's the thing. I could use resources, but then my user has to go to, and the URL looks like sessions/new. I think it makes a little more sense to make this route just /login. So what I'm going to do is create a custom route. Anybody know the syntax for this? Anybody want to walk me through this? Just like that? Anybody?
Parentheses.
Okay.
Space parentheses /login.
/login.
Comma 2 colon.
Sessions new.
Yeah.
I could do that too. If I want to set like the root to be login. Yeah.
And then comma as login.
As, just like this.
Colon login.
Login. Okay. And as a reminder, right, Ruby is super friendly to us, and, well, for better or for worse, we can actually omit a lot of the curly brackets and parentheses. These are exactly the same. Get is a method that takes in as an argument. The first parameter is the endpoint, /login. Secondly, the controller that we wish to hit, right? A key of 2 that points to this value, and a key of as that points to whatever the helper should be. These are exactly the same. If I comment this and use my more verbose version, refresh, what am I missing?
Should be in the same hash.
What am I missing here? As login. Did I do this wrong?
Should 2 and as be in the same hash?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, correct. Yeah, right. This should be 1 hash. You're right. Right. Same thing. But this is what you'll see more commonly. Right. Okay. Now, I also need, right? So let's kind of work through this iteratively. Go back, refresh, do a little bit of some error-driven development. The action new could not be found for sessions controller. How do I fix? How to fix? Please help. Great. In our sessions controller, def new. Okay, render new, refresh, and now we're going to get another error. Missing template. What's this telling us? Exactly. Views, sessions, new file, new.html.erb, and we're just going to make an h1 that says login. Okay. Now, do I want to use a form 4 here?
From tag.
Why?
It's not related to any of the models that you have.
Correct. I don't have a sessions model. I'm not actually storing who's logged in the database. I don't need to, right? This is information that just needs to live basically in the user's browser, right? Like, why do I need to create a new record every time someone logs in? I don't. My application should track who's logged in, but I don't have to actually store that in my database. So what I can do is form tag. Is everybody aware of the autocomplete that comes with Atom, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty great. So form tag. So what are these arguments here that I'm getting? Yeah, I'm going to call this login path, right? And the rest of this I can actually omit, right? Because it'll default to post. Okay. And then how do I make a label? Is it well, where do we have an F in here? Yeah. How do I do it?
Label tag.
Great. And what do I put in here?
This would be the username.
Yep. And maybe this will be a text field. Text field tag? Yeah.
What shortcut do you use to copy the same?
Oh, Command Shift D. Yep. I think it might be text field tag. Yeah, text field. I think it is text field tag. Right? Great. And now just rinse and repeat. I'm going to put a break in here, line break, and then we'll just do copy, paste, and just replace username with password. By the way, does anybody know how to make these little things turn into bullets in my password? Yep. Who thinks this is Rails magic? False! Vanilla HTML. If we open up our web inspector, we can see input type equals password. Giving our input, our HTML input field, a type of password is what causes those little bullets to show up. Not magic, just HTML5. Shout out to HTML. Okay? And then how do I actually submit this form? Submit tag. Ooh. Oh, that must be the default. Save changes. Login. Okay. Great. What do I need now?
Action to accept the form.
Exactly. What happens if I submit this? If I click login?
Yeah, but it doesn't redirect them.
Well, it's going to post to /login, but my application doesn't know how to respond to that. We'll get. I don't know how to post to /login. So where do we go first? No route matches post to /login. Routes. So we're going to go back to our routes.rb. And same thing. We're going to say a post request to /login will be to sessions create, right? Because I want to create a new session. So this is, right, I'll write this out in the controller actually. Right. So in my sessions controller, def create. So this will be a get request to /login. Render a form for the user to log in. And then here, this will be a post request, assuming I can spell this correctly, to /login. And this will handle the submission from our login form. And what we want to do is actually log the user in. I'm going to drop a bybug in here. Okay. And, oops, don't want to do that. I'm going to go to /login. We just created a new user. I can't remember any of their information. What was it? It was like Jimmy eats world or something. Jimmy. EATSWORLD. This is why I made the other one not a password field tag. Can't do this. All right, I'm going to hit enter. We should expect to see our bybug, right? A post to login hits our create method. Seems to be spinning. We're waiting for something. Waiting for localhost. Booyah. Here we go. We're in our bybug. What do I expect to see in my parameters? Username Jimmy, password eats world. Okay. So, in plain English, what do I need to do here? Log in the user in. What did I, oh, log the user in. That's what I meant to say.
Start the session.
Okay, so I need to create a session. What information do I need to create that session? Mm-hmm. So there's a couple things before I need to create the session. So I need to, right?
Oh, check if it's right.
Exactly, yeah. First, I need to find, see if we have a user with the provided username, right? Then, if we found the user, if we find the user, make sure the password provided is correct. Finally, create a session, right? Which is like log the user in via sessions and cookies. Right, we got the sessions and cookies lecture, right? That was yesterday. Great, okay. Cool. So let's break this down. See if we have a user with a provided username. Well, given a parameter of username, how can I find a user by their username? Was that a good hint? User.find by, right? Takes in a hash. Username will be params at a key of username. Great. Go ahead.
If you're finding by, don't you have to specify what you're finding by? So
Yes. What was this?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I understood that.
Yeah. Difference between find and find by. User.find will look for an ID by default. Find by is any attribute I wish to look for. I saw a hand somewhere. Was that you?
Yeah. Would you do find or create by if it prompts you that?
No.
This is just the login.
Exactly. Yeah. So sign up is creating a user in our database. Logging in is I've already created an account. I'm just logging back in, right? So we're not really touching the only database operation we're performing is a reading from. We're not actually updating the database in this. We're not mutating any of our data in this particular method, right? Only reading. Yes.
Can you say why you put it in a hash, please?
Because I find it to be clearer.
Oh, okay.
That's all. Just as a reminder, right? Like this thing that it's taking in as an argument is a hash, right? Like something that I find particular. This is a quick tangent, but something and you'll see this more when you get to JavaScript. Something that I find kind of confusing is this, right? Validates and then there's a space. What this actually is just a method that's taking in two hashes actually, right? They're the same, but yeah, it doesn't matter, right? More commonly, you'll see it without the braces. So see if we have a user with a provided username. So I can say @user equals user.find by username params the key of username. Great. Back in my by bug, I'm just going to paste this line in. Great. Now, @user. Now that I have an @user, how do I check whether or not the provided password checks out? I said check too many times. What method did we build earlier that's also provided by HasSecurePassword? Great. I was going to say it rhymes with shmauthenticate. User.authenticate. And what does authenticate take as an argument? Plain text password, which can be found through params at a key of password. Great. Now, just as a reminder, if this fails, right, we're going to add some checks later. Gives me back false. Right now, is anybody familiar with something called the happy path of software development? This is I'm starting with assuming that nothing goes wrong. For right now, I'm just going to worry about the case where the username that's provided is correct and the password that's provided is correct. We'll deal with the other cases in a second, but I'm going to deal with oh great, ideal, happy path, nothing goes wrong. My app is not going to catch on fire. It will soon, and we'll see that. But for right now, right, let's just keep it simple. So see if we have a user with a provided username. Great. If we find the user, well, that if statement is kind of indicating so we're going to have to change this a little bit later. Make sure the password provided is correct, great, and create a session. So log the user in. Well, how do I actually keep track of like some data across HTTP requests? How do I determine whether or not a user's logged in? How might I be able to do that? Kind of leveraging what we know about sessions and cookies.
Create a new session for everyone.
Great. How do we do it? Walk me through the code.
Session, I think it's sessions, plural.
Only one way to find out, right?
Session, add a key of user, or use the user ID.
Yeah. Kind of an interesting point here, right? Like in my session, what is user?
I think you just want to keep a reference to the ID and let them
Exactly.
later.
Yeah, right. I don't want to dump an entire like Ruby instance into my session because number one, the only really I can't really store a Ruby instance in the session. It's got to be like a string. I'm gonna have a hard time storing an entire Ruby object in there. So instead, I'm just gonna store some unique identifier like the user's ID, and I can always find the user ID later. Like find a user by their ID later. So session at user ID is gonna be equal to at user.id. Okay. And maybe we can redirect to at user. And maybe we can say something like flash at a key of notice is equal to login successful, welcome. Actually, I'm going to change these. Does anybody know why I'm changing these to double quotes? Yep. Welcome at user.username. By the way, string interpolation, this like hashtag like curly bracket thingy, only works in double quotes in Ruby. I don't know if you've run into that before.
Yeah.
Where it's like, why the hell is this not working? I'm not getting an error message. What? Yeah. Has to be double quotes. Just FYI your information. Then in my show page, I'm just going to say, maybe I'll just put like in an H2. I'll just put in like flash at a key of notice. Go ahead.
I have a question about the notice. I've seen something like success before. Is that rebuilding?
Yes.
Hash?
Yeah. So so the question was like I've seen things like you might just have like notice without the flash part. There's actually a method like built in that's like just like notice. It's just a syntactic sugar over flash at a key of notice or flash at a key of error. Because the idea is that like as Rails developers, we're commonly using flash notices and flash errors. So why not just like put some sugar on it and make it easier to write? Go ahead.
Yeah, what's the notice going to do? Just going to flash out.
Yeah. Well, how does flash work? What's the purpose of it?
There's an error flashes whatever messages on the screen that mistake.
All it is like I want to send a piece of data that survives one request response cycle, right? It's a piece of data that's sent along, right, as part of it's actually a subset of sessions, right? It's a piece of data, right? Because like how do this is kind of relevant, but what type of protocol is HTTP? It's like a something less protocol, right? Stateless, right? How do I share data across different HTTP requests? In other words, if a GET request and a POST request need to share some data, how do I share that data? I have to send it. The only way to share the data is to actually send it with each request. Two requests will not really know anything about each other, and this is a feature, not a bug. This is meant so that it's an optimization, right? Like there's no way to like share information without just sending it along with each request, right? Which is what our sessions allow us to do. They allow us to send extra data with each request that we need, such as a user ID, right? Without sessions, anytime the user needed to access a protected resource, they would have to log in again, over and over and over again. Instead, with every request, we just send the logged in user ID, which is, we're going to get there later, but that's like why this needs to happen. This is how HTTP works. Questions about this so far? If you have questions about like HTTP as a protocol, find me after. I'll go into more detail. Okay. So here's our happy path, right? See if we find the user, authenticate them, log them in, tell them they're logged in. I'm going to continue through my bybug, go back to /login, Jimmy eats WORLD, and attempt to log in, and I get, great, profile page for Jimmy, login successful. And the way that Flash works, right, when I refresh, this message will be gone. It's automatically cleared by Rails. Right? Thanks, Rails. Okay. So we're getting there. We kind of have the ability to log in, but users/login. That's because I'm a fool and went to the wrong URL. Okay, login. Now let's try something else. Jimmy, password, well, you can't see this, but I'm typing in hot dog. What will happen? Our app just doesn't care. Our app is like, okay, whatever, fine. Yeah, that ID looks fake. Come on anyway.
But you haven't created the if statement.
Exactly. I'm just running this line and then doing nothing. So what I really need to do is say, like, if we can authenticate the user, then do this, right? Right. Else, right? Maybe we could say flash at a key of notice. Well, here's an interesting question. If the user provides the wrong password, let's say that someone's trying to hack into our app, do we want to provide more information or less information? Less, right? But you can imagine that you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you say something like, oh, your username was right, but the password was actually wrong. If somebody's trying to break into your application, that's too much information. So we're just going to say something generic like invalid username or password. Yeah, which like this is the type of notice that you'll see like in apps all the time because it's generic. It doesn't really tell me like which of the two things that I provided were correct, right? Because if we say that your username is correct, we've now narrowed down the possibilities here, the possibility of combinations. And I'm actually going to redirect to login path. Does anybody know why I'm redirecting to instead of rendering? Yes. Well, what's the difference? Go ahead.
It won't like render it as new, like when you render
Yeah.
it, it's just like.
It'll nuke the form, right? Yeah. I want to redirect because I actually want to nuke the form. I want to like completely reset the form and just like, hey, start over, log in again. If I did a render, it would remember their username. I just want to like, hey, let's just start fresh, try to log in again, right? Whereas like in the user's controller, you may have seen something like this, right? Like if the user's valid, else render new instead of redirect. This render new will keep the data from the form so they don't have to retype it. Here, I actually want the user to have to retype everything out. The other thing I'm going to do too is make sure that my login view is able to see this flash notice. So let's go to our views, sessions, new, and just up top maybe somewhere I'll put like, I don't know, an H2 that just says flash at notice. Okay. Now let's try this again. Let's go back to login. Okay. Jimmy. Jimmy Dolphin. Okay. I'm going to hit enter. And we get kicked back over, right? We're back on login, and it says invalid username or password. Okay. So we're getting there. We're getting there. But I have another question for y'all. What happens if I do something like this? Cheeseburger. Password of hi. By the way, just FYI, I reset the database before this lecture, so all the stuff from this morning is gone. Do we have a user with a username of cheeseburger? What's going to happen? Is our app going to catch on fire in a big way? Probably. Let's find out. Yikes. So now, let's put our debugging hats on and try to figure out what the hell just happened. Undefined method authenticate for nil class. Well, if user.authenticate, it's pointing us to line 14. Right? What would your first thought be to debug this?
Well, if there's no method, that means that the object doesn't exist.
Exactly. If I take a look at @user, what do I expect to see in here?
No.
Are we familiar with this, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I've shown this to people sometimes and they're like, oh my God, what? Yeah. If you get an error message in Rails, this like helpful little console pops up and you can debug, right? At user is still in scope at this error page, which is pretty great. It's like pretty nifty quick debugging, right? I can see something like the request, right? It'll show me the request object. But yeah, at user is nil, okay? Right, so let's think about this very carefully. Undefined method nil for nil class, okay? If .authenticate is giving us undefined method for nil class, what does that tell us about at user? In other words, what are we trying to call authenticate on?
On the current instance of user.
Current instance of user, but it looks like if we go back here, at user is nil. So what happens if I do like at user.authenticate? Looks like that error that I got, right? Undefined method authenticate for nil class. Therefore, user must be nil. So now let's look at our code and figure out why user is nil or when user gets set, and we might be able to figure this out. Theories.
So you are doing like find by, right?
Yep.
If find by, like, if that fails, then it shouldn't continue at all.
Well, let's see what happens. Maybe I'll try something, right? User. Can we all see this, or is this too low? User dot find by username. What is this going to give us back?
We never created a user in the first place.
Well, that's the point, right? The point of this is like I'm trying to log in with a user that doesn't exist. I'm trying to show you like what happens when we have a bad username.
But did you even make a create method? Like in
Yeah, we did this morning.
User?
Yeah.
But in this file?
No, because this is a login, right? Logging in is not creating a new user.
Oh, okay, I thought we had
It's a session.
This is just like an existing user wants to log in.
okay.
Yeah, the user's controller is what handles the creation of a new account, right? This is all working fine. Our sessions controller is like, I need to take an existing user and log them in. So if we look here, user.find by username cheeseburger, what will this give us back? What does this return? Nil. Therefore, what will at user point to? Nil. So what we need to do maybe is say something like, if at user, and then wrap this and like have nested if statements. Who thinks this is kind of nasty? Man, wouldn't there be a, I wonder if there's some way to like do it in one line.
Tell me there's a macro.
It's not a macro. It's not a macro. It's actually, this is just like a short circuiting thing that you can do it in, I don't want to say every programming language, but in many.
Add a user and
Yeah, walk me through that.
add a user and so it's saying if first you have to evaluate something true p on the first side, and then evaluate true p.
Let's think about this for a second. Okay? This is not a Rails thing. This is not even a Ruby thing. This is a lazy evaluation thing. Ruby is lazy, so is JavaScript. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just open up an IRB session. And I'm just going to make something called, well, let's say like true and true. What am I going to get back? What are the rules of the double ampersand operator? Both sides have to be true. Okay? So how about true and not a variable? What am I going to get back here? Are we sure? Undefined local variable or method, not a variable. Why? Well, I'm Ruby and I'm lazy, and I know that both sides of this have to be true. So, well, okay, the left hand is true. Now I need to look at the right hand to confirm that the entire expression is true. When I look at the right hand, I realize, oh, I don't know what this thing is. Let me error out. Okay? However, what if I do something like this? False and not a var. Now what do we think is going to happen? Why didn't we get the error message?
It's evaluating after it finds.
Because Ruby's lazy. Ruby is lazy. That's why. I'm Ruby. I'm looking at this. Oh, if both sides of this have to be true, I found one thing that's false. Therefore, the whole thing is false. I'm done. I'm not even going to look to the right. So in our specific case, nil and not a var, we just get back nil, right? So what this means is if our user is nil, Ruby will not even look to the right, will not even attempt to authenticate and just say, hey, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, I'm done. Anybody watch that show, by the way? Just me? So we can kind of like, we can just wrap everything in one if statement. So Ruby will lazily evaluate this statement. I think there's something in the README that breaks it down. If there isn't, I'll add one. Let me just double check for that. Lazy. Okay, I'll add it later. Something that like about this line specifically. Ruby will lazily evaluate the statement. Okay. If user and user.authenticate, params at password, great. Otherwise, move on. So now let's try our application as it is. Where are we? Okay. I'm going to go back to login. Okay. Great. Our app is no longer on fire. Nice. And again, right? Jimmy, wrong password. Great. Cool. Okay. All right. So we're making some progress. Questions about this before we move on? A lot of this is detailed in the README. I would, if you like, I would suggest just like kind of just take in as much of this as you can and then go back to the README afterwards. The README is like a summary of everything we're talking about here. If you have questions, let me know. Go ahead.
It's just like an extra thing. Can you add a count variable and like only let them try 3 times?
Yeah. We could say like session at count or something like that and say like, oh, you've attempted to log in 3 times, timeout or something like that. Yeah, that's totally doable, right? Like you've probably seen that with your bank, right? You put in the wrong password like 5 times and they lock you out for a little bit. Yeah, we could add that like with a session or something like that. Session at count plus equals 1 every time they fail to log in. Yeah, very doable. Other questions about this? Okay. We are now able to provide credentials and get logged in. Our application knows that we're logged in, but let's say that, right, Jimmy eats world, okay? I only want this button to show up if I'm that current user, right? If I go to users 2, do I have a user 2? I don't. Let me just make some, let me just sign up for another user real quick. Username will be Tony, hi. Okay? But if I go to user/1, right? Notice that like any profile I go to, I'm still prompted with this button to delete this profile. Man, that kind of sucks, right? Furthermore, let's pretend that we're building out like an antisocial app. I should only be able to see my own profile, okay? If there's some logic that needs to determine what I'm allowed to see and not allowed to see, does that functionality necessarily belong to the sessions controller? Where is that? How many places is that potentially relevant? Everywhere. If there is a piece of functionality that is relevant to our app as a whole, where might that live? Hint, hint. Look at what I scrolled up to. Oh, should I highlight for you? Application controller, right? Our application controller is the parent controller of everything else. If there's some shared functionality that's kind of global or relevant to the rest of our controllers, we will lift it up one level and let the application controller do it. Otherwise, we're going to have to duplicate logic in every single subcontroller, which, right, don't repeat yourself. That sounds like a lot of repetition. So what I'm going to do is go to my application controller, and basically what I need to do is say like, are we logged in? Are we allowed to see this page? Right? And whomst is the user stored in our session at the moment. At the moment. Okay. So let's do a couple things. I'm going to say, make a method called current user. Right? And this is just going to return, yeah, user.find. Good question. Do I want to use, oh, sorry. Should I use find or find by? Great question. Should I use find or find by here? Anybody know the difference between the two?
Well, find by you have to specify which attribute you're finding.
Is there anything else about find versus find by?
If you use find by and it doesn't exist, it'll give you nil, which it needs to debug. And if you just use find, it'll give you like a nil in there or something.
Exactly. Here's the main difference. Rails console. User.find. Do we have an ID of 999? No. This throws an error message, and my application is on fire. However, find by just gives me nil and does not crash and burn my application to the ground. Which of these two probably seems like the way to go? Do I want my application to catch on fire? Probably not. So what I'm going to do is say find by ID will be session, add a key of user ID. Right? So find by will give me nil. User.find will error out if there is no user. Okay. And what does find by return if it doesn't find anything? Oh, I wrote it right here. It returns nil. Is nil truthy or falsy?
False.
Nil is falsy. So I might be able to say something like if current user, right? Hoo, hoo, hoo. Ha ha ha. Okay. So now I'm just going to make a method called logged in. The convention in Ruby, and by the way, this is just a Ruby thing, to actually have a question mark in your method signature, really unusual, but it's a Ruby thing. If our method should return a Boolean, the Ruby standard is to add a question mark to it, right? Should this return true or false? The method signature or the name of it should actually have a question mark, right? Like there's other methods I'm sure you've encountered like this. Okay, and all that this is going to do is return current user. Questions about this operator?
Yeah, what is it?
Great.
Needs to know.
What will this give me back? Whoa. What will this give me back? Okay. What will this give me back? What will this give me back? So all that this allows me to do is just to be super explicit, coerce current user into a Boolean, right? So not, right? Like not nil will give me back false, but user. I want to specify that this should be a user instance, right? This will actually give me back something that's true, right? Because a Ruby instance is considered to be truthy. So we're just going to be super explicit and just coerce current user into a Boolean. You don't have to use this in your own code. It's a little bit more explicit to me because then logged in actually does return true or false. Like super clear and explicit about what's going on. Finally, I'm going to make a method called authorized. Okay. And what should authorized do? What does it sound like the responsibility of this method should be?
Check where.
Yeah. So we can say unless logged in redirect to login path Seems pretty straightforward, right? Unless we're logged in, say, hey, you must be logged in to see this page, and kick us back over to login. Makes sense, right? I try to see something and I'm not supposed to. It's going to say, hey, wait, you know what? You're not allowed to see this. Go back somewhere else. Right? You tried to go somewhere you're not supposed to. Questions about this so far?
For the logged in, you said that you're just being super explicit and we don't have to use it. Are you talking about that whole method?
Yeah. I could also say unless current user. Same thing, right? I just think that this reads a little bit better, like unless logged in. Oh, okay, great. This reads like English, right? Unless I'm logged in, great. Like seems a little clearer to me. Now, what I want to happen is more or less like lock down my entire application with a few exceptions. How? Well, back here, we're on the user page for users 1. Right? How can I lock down my application here? I want to start by locking it down, then I'm going to change some of the permissions later. But basically what I want to happen is I want to just like, let's say I'm logged out, right? I don't have a way to log out right now, so I'm just going to go to my cookies and just manually clear them. Cookies, localhost, clear. My cookies are gone. What I want to see is refresh. If I refresh the page, it should say, hey, you must be logged in to see that. Does my application currently do that? No. I have an authorized method, but am I calling it anywhere? No. How can I ensure that something happens before anything else happens?
Before action.
Booyah! Before action, authorized. Now let's test this out. Okay, we got to this bug sooner than I wanted to, but okay. Let's think about what's going on. I'm going to refresh the page. Localhost redirected you too many times. Too many redirects. And Chrome is going to be like, clear your cookies? Let's take a look at our server logs. Okay. Started get to login. Processing by sessions controller new as HTML. Redirected to localhost 3000 login. Filter chain halted as authorized. Rendered or redirected. Started get login. Processing by sessions controller. Redirected to login. Started get login. Redirected login. Started get login. Is anybody seeing a pattern here perhaps? What have I just done? Yeah, I've now set up my application so that I have to be logged in order to log in. Whoops. So, right, my application is a little too locked down, right? What I want to do is like on certain pieces of this application, I want to actually ignore this before action. Does anybody know how to like not run a before action or perhaps skip a before action? Skip. It's just called like controller skip before action. Authorized, only, new, great. And just as a reminder, the authorized before action comes from application controller. Sessions controller inherits from application controller. Therefore, authorized is called before anything in any controller runs. Nice. Okay. Now, let's try this. Let me try to go to users/1. Okay. All right. So we're getting somewhere. So now let's try to log in. Timmy, Jimmy. Bye. Okay. Oh, right. Users 2, users 3. Okay. Last little bit here. How do I get rid of this button?
To authorize on your view.
Yeah, right. I could add just a piece of logic in my users show and say something maybe like if current, oh, whoops, this has to be wrapped in a little bracket, guys. I think I can actually put it in here, right? If, I was just gonna, whoa.
You could put it at the end of the button too.
Yeah, well, what I want to do is like if current user.id, yeah, if current user, well, what I want to do basically is like, is this current user the same as us, right? Like the current as this user here, right? So if current user.id is equal to @user.id, then do this, end. And then I can just tab this in. But we're going to get an error message. Name error, undefined local variable or method, current user. Does anybody know why I'm getting this?
You have to do it from the controller.
Yeah. If I want a method in my controller to be available in my view, what I actually have to do is add this special little macro called helper method current user. This will make it available in my views. Just FYI. I know that this is like kind of a contrived example and there's other ways to handle this particular case, but I wanted to point out this helper method thing in case you hadn't seen it before. Right? There's other things we could do. Like you can also imagine like maybe having like a log out button using a helper method. So just FYI, it exists. Do what you want with it. Run with it. Cool. There's really only one last thing to do, and then we're done here. Ooh, and perfectly on time, right? What time did we say we'd be done? 3 or 2? What time? 3. Oh, geez. How long have we been going for? Did I just do this really fast? Oh my God, it's already been an hour. Okay. I think I just blocked out extra time for this. Yeah, fine. One last thing, okay? Well, two last things actually, since we have the extra time. Application. Who thinks that this sucks in terms of logout? You have to have like a banner at the top of your app. Open your web inspector, navigate to application, go to cookies, manually clear your cookies to log out. I'm pretty sure our users are not going to like that very much. Another thing too, if I go to users/new, this is kind of an annoying user experience, right? Oh, sorry. Well, by the way, if I try to create a new account, notice what happens. I have to be logged in to create an account. Possibly yikes. So let's fix that real quick. How do we allow our new and create to be accessible when we're not logged in? So that's the first part of it, right? We actually can't create a new account. But importantly, users/new, let's make a new account. Jeff, shout out a username. What's your favorite username?
Apples and oranges.
Apples, ooh, that's a lot. Apples and, we do something shorter?
Apples.
Apples, great, perfect. What's the password?
Oranges.
Okay, great. If I hit enter, am I going to be logged in?
Should be.
Shit. You must be logged in to see your own profile, which means, okay, I sign up for an account, fine, I'll like apples, oranges, okay, fine. What does this mean? Well, when I create a new user, do I actually get logged in?
No, it's just created.
Yeah, so maybe what I can do is say something like session and a key of user ID is equal to @user.id. Now notice that, well, we could refactor this, right? Because this exact line appears in a couple different places. Where? Here and our sessions controller. So maybe we can actually, well, if there's a method that appears in 2 places and we want to refactor it, where might we be able to lift the responsibility up to? Yeah. You maybe make like a method in application controller that's like def login user that takes in like a user, and we can just do something like session add a key of user ID is equal to user.id. Again, this part is optional, but this I think we should lift up, right? Because otherwise, like, what if I change it? I want it to be like UID or something like USRID or something like the literal key in my hash. If that changes, I need to now hunt it down in my application. Instead of like delegating it to a method, if I need to change it, it just goes in one place. So I'm just going to comment this out, and I'm just going to say login user taken at user. Same as manually setting session comes from application controller, right? And then same thing for our users controller. I'm going to cut this out and just say login user, and this will take in at user, right? Same as above, delegated to application controller. Questions about this part? Minor refactor, little cleanup here. Okay. Now let's log out and make sure this actually works. Application, clear. Great. Apples, oranges, great. Works. And also make sure it works for sign up, and then I'll show you how to log out, and then we're done. So we are nearly done. Anybody? Laura, username.
Mom.
Mom? Okay. What's mom's password?
Make me proud.
Baby what?
Make me proud.
Make me proud. Okay. Great. Last thing. Well, if I want to log out, who's responsible for kind of like, I guess, the CRUD operations on our sessions? Sessions controller. So maybe I can just do something like def destroy, or even def logout, right? I'm going to call it destroy, just to like be consistent here, because I'm using like the other like kind of like normal controller verbs that we see. And how do I actually like log somebody out? Yeah. Session dot delete user ID, or session at user ID is equal to nil. Either one is fine. This is just Ruby syntax. If you haven't seen it before, H is equal to Pizza Hut H dot delete a key of pizza. Right? It's just like, how do I delete a key from a hash in Ruby? That's all it is. Okay. And then maybe we'll redirect to, I don't know, login path. Login path, and we'll say maybe flash at notice is equal to log out successful. Cool. All right. That's pretty much it. We can do, well, who wants to see like how to create like a kind of like a global login logout button that appears everywhere in our application? Do we have like enough bandwidth for that, or am I going to lose everybody? Good? Okay. If there is something that I want to appear in all of my views, where should that go? Well, in my views specifically, what is the, like the application controller of the views? Exactly, right? Everything else in our application is going to be yielded here. So what if I want to do something like maybe current user, button 2, log out, method delete. Else, button 2. I missed something, right? This should be like login path. Login path. Is anybody uncomfortable with ternary operators, by the way? I can write this out like the longer way. I'll have them side by side so we can compare. Button 2, login. Login path. And by the way, does anybody know off the top of their head like what type of method button 2 tries to send? Like what is button 2 actually? It's a form. Yeah, it's not a button. It's actually a form. It's a hidden sneaky form. So if I want to tell my form to send a get request to login, I actually have to say method get. Let me verify that this works real quick, and then we'll break this down because I'm not sure how familiar we are with the syntax. Let's refresh. Great, syntax error. Great, probably something that I messed up in my button. Yeah, button 2. Let me make sure that I did this right. Button 2. So current user. Show me a button 2, log out, login path, method delete. Oh, okay, I think it's being confused by this. Let me just wrap these in some curlies. Button 2, login, login path, method get. Great. Current user.
With parentheses after button 2.
Yeah, that was my next thought. It's like I think some of this like Ruby magic is getting a little confused here. Login path method delete. Yeah, and just be super explicit about what's going on here. Okay, great, yeah. So that's all it was. It was just like trying to parse this, right? Like when Ruby was like trying to parse the syntax here, it was like, what the hell? It's like, I don't know, where you want me to add the parentheses, where am I gonna put the brackets in here? Because like all that does like happen like when your code is interpreted. Great, log out. No route matches get delete to login. Why? Right? Now let's try this again. Okay. Let me go back to login. Log out. No delete request is, oh, /login. I'm sorry. I didn't read this. Yeah, what am I doing? This should actually be log out path. Did everybody see that? I think I put login path in here by mistake. Yeah, this should be actually log out path. Everybody see the difference? Right? Here we go. Yeah, log out. Great. Log in. Right, and I'll write this out like the kind of longer form without the ternary, because this actually might be kind of hard to read on one line. I thought it would be like nifty, it'd be cool. Dude, it's a ternary, but it's actually like kind of gross. It's too long. It's just too long for a ternary. Sorry, everybody. You know, sometimes that one-liner is like, nice. Other times it's like, you chill, please, stop, cut it out. Are there other questions about what we have covered so far? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Please read the README. Thanks.